What I love about them is their rhythm. I mean, they have no culture or anything, but they have this wonderful natural rhythm.
Of course, they're different from us. Their brains are smaller. That's why they've never accomplished anything.
Sure, they were brought to this country by force, but it's the best thing that ever happened to them. Saved them from a life of running naked in the jungles.
They were only savages in Africa anyway. Cannibals, cooking each other for dinner. I mean, in this country they had churches to go to, and decent food. They had a chance to see how civilized people live. Besides, hard work never killed anybody.
For more than 400 years, the attitudes of Americans with white skin toward Americans with dark skin have been based on information like this. A set of myths built up to try to justify one of the cruelest business operations in history. Europeans ran it, some Africans cooperated with it, and Americans profited by it. It was called the slave trade. It snatched black babies from their mothers, killed thousands of innocent Africans, turned brother against brother, made millions of dollars, and eventually helped turn this country in the early 1860s into a bloody battleground.
The cruelty of the slavery system in the so-called civilized world led to many myths about black men, myths that white people wanted to believe so that they could feel better about the horrors of slavery. Many of the myths still exist.
Basic to the myths is the false assumption that black people all possess the same qualities, and that these qualities make them inferior to white people.
Until the white man came with his advanced ways, Africa was a dark continent, an untamed jungle. The people were all cannibals.
Black people are like happy-go-lucky children. They don't mind suffering. In fact, they really like it.
There was nothing much in Africa anyway. Never any civilization worth anything. Just animals and savages.
Just savages. Savages. Savages.
Since the beginning of their history, black men have been of all types, all sizes, all degrees of skill. They've built great civilizations, manned centers of higher learning, and abused their fellow man. They've been scholars, artists, and criminals. They've been healers, kings, and jailers.
Throughout history, they have been good like all men and bad. And since their earliest days in Africa, they have played an important role in the drama of mankind. In the beginning, anthropologists say all men were black. Human history begins in Africa long, long ago.
When time crept slowly, marked not by calendars and clocks, but by the sun and the moon, and birth and death.
A West African scholar said once that trying to learn the truth about what happened on that continent thousands of years ago is like trying to trap wind in a sieve.
So many different peoples with so many different ways. They spread across the length and breadth of the continent. The early men, forerunners of the Bushmen, forerunners of the Pygmies, forerunners of the American citizens who today are called blacks.
2 million years ago, Africans devised and used hunting and farming tools.
6,000 years ago, in the Sahara, they drew portraits and detailed scenes on rocks.
Then came those times more than 3,000 years ago, with Europe struggling in the dark, that comes before civilization, when men came from all over Africa to join together, to form
the great civilization that was called Egypt.
Never had the world known such glory. The people of Egypt were of all colors. The great pharaohs, the rulers of Egypt, were of all colors. And the slaves who built Egypt with the strength of their hands were of all colors.
From warm Mediterranean lands came olive-skinned people, yellow-skinned men from the east, and brown and black-skinned Africans, Cushites, Nubians, Ethiopians.
Together they built, invented, achieved, using battle captives as workers. The founders of ancient Egypt developed agriculture, learned to tame animals, originated industry. They knew how to mine ore, refine metal, and lay bricks. Their accomplishments would change the future of the world. Written language, systems of government, political organizations.
Their achievements were monumental. Medicine, science, mathematics. They devised calendars and built pyramids. They left legacies to profit all mankind. The panorama of history was rich. Jesus was born. Briefly, he walked the earth, and he died, and men became Christians. Now the years numbered A.D., or after the death of Christ.
In Ethiopia, black men ruled in splendor and might. They adopted Egyptian systems of writing. They built fine cities. They constructed pyramids and temples and traded goods with Arab tribes from beyond the Red Sea, with Europeans, and with the merchants of India.
Muhammad was born. Briefly, he walked the earth, and he died. Men became Muslims, followers of Islam, the religion of Muhammad.
The powerful pull of this religion sent thousands sweeping through Africa, searching for converts to Islam.
What they found as they moved across the vast and awe-inspiring land was a series of civilizations, some simple, some complex, with the beginnings of government, civil service, military forces, barter, trade, and systems of taxation.
What they did not find was the kind of technical knowledge that was to develop so rapidly in Europe.
In those days of untracked wildernesses, the scene was set for why Africans would lag behind their European brothers in inventing weapons, tools, and machines.
Devices which later would help make it possible for Europeans to capture and sell Africans into slavery.
Africans lived, many of them, an isolated existence in extended family groups or tribes, far, far from other such groups.
There were relatively so few of them on that huge continent where food and game were abundant.
Few tools were needed to survive in many areas of Africa. Nature was kind, and life moved from day to day simply and often prosperously, with no call for sophisticated tools and machines.
Yes, as the Muslims pushed farther into Africa, they found civilizations, some nestled in the savannas and desert of West Africa, amid the great plains and seasonal heat, civilizations as rich as any the world had ever known. A series of black civilizations that for centuries would be told about.
By fathers to their sons and those to their sons, just as now I tell it to you. My story takes place in Africa in about the 11th century, about the same time the Normans were invading a little-known island in northern Europe, an island called England.
Ghana, the land of gold. To be king of Ghana is to be bearer of a rich tradition. My name is Tenkaminen. I am king. My rule is divine. I am master of a great empire. My power is formidable. I am patriarch, father of the Soninke people. I am military chief, religious leader, chief of justice, supreme overseer of my empire. Many of my people keep to the old ways. In riverside villages, following their herds, they live as did their fathers before them, caring for cattle, tilling the land, mining gold, and trading for salt, casting their nets for fish. Their world is the family, the village, the clan. Each day, many of my people cluster around me. They answer the drumbeat, calling them to me. To the great courtyard of my palace they gather to hear my rulings on decisions affecting my people. The palace is well fortified. It is made beautiful by Ghanaian sculpture and paintings. Royal artists have decorated the windows. On the palace grounds rests a prison for our political enemies, and the tombs of the kings who have gone before me. To the south of us, the Yoruba people honor their king with statues fashioned of brass and with figures of terracotta. But ours is a land of gold. My people gaze on my silken robes covered with jewels, my golden turban, my collar and gold bracelets. 10 of my most magnificent horses, dressed in gold, surround me. My dogs guard the palace doors, collared in gold. To my right stand the princes of the kingdom. Behind me stand 10 armed pages, their swords and lances fashioned of iron, their sword handles made of gold. Before me on the ground sit the imperial officials. My people clap in respect to me. They fall on their knees, throw dust in their hair. I make official appointments, settle disputes, hear reports on the royal treasury. The drums beat out the news. My rule is absolute. I am king.
10 Kamenan rules over the temple to our gods as well. In all of Africa, no gods are as richly worshipped as ours. Our serpent god, Ugadubida, is the most feared of all.
Ancient Ghana graced the savanna lands, the grassy plains of West Africa, an area much larger and far from the present-day land of Ghana.
Ghana, the name in Mandi, the language of the Songhai people, means warrior king. By the 11th century, Ghana was a complex, highly civilized land blessed with a richness of iron and gold. It had a judicial system, a communication network using drums, and a well-disciplined, well-armed army. El-Bekri, an Arab scholar who wrote of the 11th century Ghana, said,
"The king of Ghana can put 200,000 warriors in the field, more than 40,000 of them armed with bow and arrow."
Arabs had been part of life in Western Africa since they first pushed into that territory in the 700s. Many had settled among the black men of the Sudan, bringing with them the teachings of Islam and a written language, Arabic. They also brought their abilities as traders and helped develop a big trans-Sahara caravan trade.
Gold and slaves moved north. Salt mined by the slaves in the bleak desert town of Taghaza. Horses, cloth, swords, books, and other goods moved south.
Of all the traded goods, the most glamorous and spectacular was the gold that poured out of the mines and riverbeds of Western Africa.
Fabled Wangara, a gold-producing area of immense wealth, came under the control of Ghanan kings. The people of Wangara developed a system of dumb barter that kept them always out of sight to Arab traders.
We Arab traders would load our camels with goods and salt and move into Ghana, there to be met by black men who guided our caravans to the gold country. They would lead us to a spot on the bank of a river. There we would beat large drums to announce the opening of the market. We piled the goods in rows, each man marking his merchandise. Then the caravans would pull a half-day's journey away.
When the Arabs were gone, we miners arrived in our boats and heaped gold dust beside the goods that we wanted. Then we returned to our boats and left the market.
We returned to the scene, and if we were satisfied with the amount of gold left for our goods, we picked it up, leaving the goods, then signaled that we were satisfied and left to prepare for the next trading caravan. If we thought that the miners had paid insufficient gold for our salt and other merchandise, we left again, hoping that they would add to the piles of gold. This went on until a trade agreeable to both sides was reached.
After they left, we returned to the market, picked up our goods, and returned to our homes. This dumb barter was cleverly planned, because never did we reveal to the traders the location of our gold fields. Never did we run the risk of having our treasure found and taken away.
Trade was also very important in the life in Kumbi, the capital city of Ghana. Arab and Negro merchants brought to that community an endless variety of goods for sale: cattle, sheep, honey, wheat, raisins, dried fruit, cloth, Spanish blouses, Moroccan robes. Local artisans offered leather goods and tassels of pure gold thread, as well as copper, ivory, pearl, gold jewelry, iron weapons, sandals, and pottery.
The king of Ghana profited hugely from his trade. Each donkey load of goods brought into Ghana was taxed, and each donkey load taken out was taxed. He collected tribute from vassal kingdoms and kept any gold nuggets found in the profitable mining trade. It was said he had a chunk of gold big enough to tie a horse to.
But of the business activities that kept Ghana prosperous, one of the most thriving was the slave market. Merchants from North Africa regularly risked long journeys across the fierce Sahara. They went to buy black slaves sold by other black men who captured them from weaker tribes south of Ghana.
But with all her strength and prosperity, Ghana had a powerful enemy. That enemy came to full power during the reign of King Tenkaminen.
They called themselves Almoravids, and they were fanatic in their Muslim belief. They called me a pagan. They looked down upon our gods and our ancestral religion. They had no use for our gods. They refused to be content with the freedom we always allowed our Muslim population. They wanted Ghana. We resisted for years. Finally, it became too powerful a force. By 1077, our great divided city of Kumbi fell to the Almoravids. The city was destroyed. Our property seized. Those of my people who refused to accept the Muslim religion were massacred. Thus, the history books wrote an end to the story of the great black civilization of Ghana. Divided city of Kumbi fell to the Almoravids. The city was destroyed. Our property seized. Those of my people who refused to accept the Muslim religion were massacred. Thus, the history books wrote an end to the story of the great black civilization of Ghana. Divided city of Kumbi fell to the Almoravids. The city was destroyed. Our property seized. Those of my people who refused to accept the Muslim religion were massacred. Thus, the history books wrote an end to the story of the great black civilization of Ghana.
Kingdoms rose and fell, but the Africans retained belief in their gods.
Christians in Europe told a tale of creation in which, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. It took him 6 days.
And on the seventh, he rested.
In Africa, many tribes found their ways to explain the origin of the earth.
The Yoruba say that at first the world was all swamp and marsh, and sometimes the gods came down from the sky on spiders' webs to play. One day, the Supreme Being called his chief, Great God, and asked him to create solid ground. Great God took a snail shell filled with loose earth, a pigeon, and a 5-toed hen. Down in the marsh, he threw the earth from the snail shell, then put the pigeon and hen down and told them to scratch. Soon they had covered most of the marsh, and solid ground was formed. The Supreme Being sent a chameleon to inspect the work. The job took the African god 4 days, and he reserved the 5th for worship of him.
Uagadu Bida, the serpent god, was dead, and Ghana was no more. But another great empire was rising, an empire as large as the whole of Western Europe. With it rose a hero of the Mandingo people, a hero whose name would live on in legend as part of the heritage of West Africa.
They called me Sundiata. My father was king of Mali, head of the Kita clan. He named me Sundiata, hungering lion. A funny name for me. As a child, I was so sickly I could not stand or walk. I was labeled an incurable invalid. My father died when I was very young, and control of our land fell to Sumanguru, king of Soso. Sumanguru taxed my father's people without mercy and ordered any rivals for his power slain. But he spared me. Perhaps he thought such a frail boy could never challenge him, but I proved him wrong. Despite great pain, I taught myself to walk with a cane, then without a cane. I became an expert horseman, a skilled hunter. My reputation for courage spread throughout the Sudan. The Mandingos looked upon me as the prince who would save them from the oppressive Sosos. Sumanguru and I fought in 1235. Sumanguru was defeated, and I, Sundiata, went on to occupy his empire. We took over the fortress of Soso. We plundered the city of Kumbi, once capital of Ghana. We triumphed. Mali was the most powerful state in the Western Sudan. I retired from the wars undefeated.
Sundiata and his followers worked hard for years to build Mali into a wealthy territory. In time, the gold mines of Wangara meant riches for Mali, just as they once had for Ghana.
Sundiata died a hero, a West African folk character remembered to this day in dances, songs, and epic poems.
His people lived on under the rule of emperors who took the proud title Mansa. They were religious men, these rulers who were to lead Mali to her days of glory. But one ruler was the greatest and most religious of all. He was to bring a power and prestige to his homeland that would send his name down in history as the most famous ruler in the Western Sudan.
I was Mansa Musa, Moses, son of Congo. My grandmother was sister of the famed Sundiata. For 25 years in the 1300s, I ruled the kingdom of Mali. I increased our territory through war and diplomacy. I encouraged learning, art, and commerce. And in 1324, I went to Mecca, the holy city of all Muslims. The caravan I took on my pilgrimage was spectacular. 60,000 people went with me. The journey was thousands of miles across barren desert to the holy city. We took with us 100 camel loads of gold dust, each weighing about 300 pounds. So impressive was our caravan that for 100 years afterward, people along the line of march talked about it in hushed tones. Never had Egypt seen a sight to rival it. I was generous with gifts to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, and on my return trip, I spread the waves of my generosity all over Cairo. So much gold had I put into circulation that I almost ruined the Egyptian gold market. 12 years after my visit, the gold trade in Cairo had still not returned to normal. I brought the outside world a brief, dazzling look at the splendor and glory that was the land of Mali. From that time on, all of Europe, Africa, and the Orient would know of our power and might. They would be aware that ours was a rich civilization, a glittering jewel in Africa's crown.
Mali rose to even greater heights. Each of its provinces had officials appointed by the Mansa. So well governed and well policed were these areas that merchants with caravans of goods traveled freely through them with no thought of robbers. Mali was a land of plenty. Her women, an Arab visitor wrote, of surpassing beauty. There was rich commercial trade in gold and salt. Every city and village had wood carvers, silversmiths, goldsmiths, coppersmiths, blacksmiths, weavers, tanners, dyers.
A visiting historian wrote, Egyptians came there in numerous caravans every year. In Mali itself, these foreigners had an influence which was all the greater since the Mansa drew large tax revenues from them. Thriving cities lent luster to the glory of Mali. There was the capital, Niani, the great metropole of the western Sudan, Walata, gateway to the Sudan for trans-Sahara caravans, Gao, farther inland on the Niger River, and the magnificent Timbuktu, which grew from a tiny group of tents to a city famous throughout the 15th century world for its commerce and learning. It was a city where judges, doctors, and clerics thrived. Books were in demand. A city of scholars whose university was one of the most famous in the world. Culture flourished in Timbuktu while Europe thrashed in the agony of the 100 Years' War.
In 1332, Mansa Musa died. He had brought to the western Sudan the century of Musa.
Many years later, an atlas drawn for Charles V, King of France, showed a drawing of a black man wearing regal robes, a crown, and carrying a scepter in one hand, a gold nugget in the other. The inscription read,
This Negro lord is called Mansa Mali, Lord of the Negroes. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king of all the land.
Mali went on. Art and architecture advanced. Flat-roofed houses were built in Gao and Timbuktu. But the end was beginning.
Timbuktu was captured and set on fire. The two Songhai princes escaped to their home and founded a new Songhai dynasty in Gao. It grew stronger as Mali weakened.
Late in the 1400s, Songhai's strength grew greater than Mali's. Desperate to hold their position of power, Malians attempted without success to ally with the Portuguese.
For 200 more years, Mali continued to exist, but her days of glory were over. Her power had faded, never to return.
Some have said that I was a warrior, greater than Napoleon. My name is Sunni Ali. My empire, Songhai. My conquests, many. First, the great city of Timbuktu with its university and its scholars. We captured it, we plundered it, and we slew hundreds of its inhabitants. Historians describe me as a master tyrant, a scoundrel. They complained of my cruelty to Muslim scholars of Timbuktu. but my people looked upon me as the Most High. I turned my attention to the great city of Jenny, with its thousands of university teachers and its medical centers. It was said that difficult surgery had been performed by medical doctors at Jenny. That siege went on for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Eventually, exhausted and on the brink of starvation, we triumphed. To seal a bond between victor and the vanquished, I married the Queen Mother of Jenny, mother of the young king. I invited him to sit beside me on the throne. It marked the beginning of the supremacy of Songhai.
Sunni Ali Burr died in 1492, the year an Italian named Christopher Columbus discovered a new world across the sea. Songhai's next ruler, whose name glows brightly from the pages of history, was the great Mohammed Askia. For 35 momentous years, he reigned over the land, bringing achievements in centralized governments. Eventually, in 1590, Songhai would fall to invaders from the north, who allowed her highly developed culture and commerce to dwindle away.
Europeans who were pushing to new frontiers and exploring the seas began to appear on the African scene. Slowly, the picture changed. Events were leading up to the slave trade, which would transport black men from their land across the sea in a forced mass migration.
Life in West African villages when the white man began to arrive was a mixture of ritual, routine, tradition, and adaptation.
An example, Dahomey.
In Dahomey, the king was absolute ruler, but we women were its truly important citizens. We fought, we Amazons, side by side with the men, and were said to be even fiercer and more ruthless in battle. Each official of the government was assigned to a woman called a mother, who watched over his every transaction and reported it to the king. We were permitted to join the ranks of priests to make and inherit money. We could also head families. A wealthy woman, usually of noble origins, would collect slave girls and commoners and lend them to her brothers or cousins. Their children then called her father, used her name, and inherited her wealth. Eventually, the woman's oldest granddaughter assumed her name, and the family began again.
The tradition of cooperation was strong in Dahomey. Work gangs of young men helped build houses, clear fields, maintain roads. Groups of artisans banded together to buy and share raw materials. Potters fired their work together. Weddings and funerals were paid for by a sort of a group insurance.
It was from this land, with its powerful king, its talent for organization, its strong-minded, resourceful women, that so many men and women would be sold into slavery.
By 1600, the days of glory for the Western Sudan were over. A Sudanese historian commenting on the fall of Songhai said this:
From that moment on, everything changed. Danger took the place of security, poverty of wealth. Peace gave way to violence.
Like societies in other parts of the world, Western African societies were marked by human weakness and strength, moments of brilliance and events of tragedy. During the glorious age of civilization in the Sudan, a chief was given this list of instructions from his people. Tell him that we do not wish for greediness. We do not wish that he should curse us. We do not wish that his ears should be hard of hearing. We do not wish that he should call people fools. We do not wish that he should act on his own initiative. We do not wish things done as in Kumasi. We do not wish that it should ever be said, I have no time, I have no time. We do not wish personal abuse. We do not wish personal violence.
By any standards, African, European, Oriental, black, white, yellow, or red, thinking such as this represents the highest sort of civilization. And looking back on early life in Africa, we hear echoes of an African poem.
"'Tis an old one, that fathers have told sons, and those sons told their sons, as I tell it now to you. Mefri Sika, Sika in Gaia so, Mefri in Tama in Gai so, O Nipa ne Assam. I call gold. Gold is mute. I call cloth. Cloth is mute. Is mute. It is mankind that matters.
Fire.